I'm going to talk about custom code chatbots, which are similar to what Teresa just explained to you, but maybe a little bit different. My name is Kevin Welsh. I own a company called Welsh Technologies. We started in 2004. We do software, web application development. So Frank's claim, and I use this as my cue for what it is that I'd be talking about, is that lead generation, sales, survey, segmentation, that bots can help people engage with your content. And I would add to that bots reach your audience where they are. People no longer have to come to your website. They can connect with your information from their phone without browsing to your page. They can talk to Siri or Cortana or Alexa, right? They've got access to this information right where they are in the moment. So when you think about some company or agency that is just the best example of high quality customer service, who comes to mind? I mean, everybody, this should be the number one. It's the DMV, right? That's like, they nail it, they get it, right? Okay, so the reason that they don't is because they don't have the budget to meet that scale, right? There's more people trying to get their services than they have people to provide those services. And so it's a cluster type of scenario, right? It's not ideal. So let's say you were looking to renew your registration for the North Carolina DMV. Have anybody been through this process yet recently? They built a bot, right? And this is like a really nice quality experience that you do not expect from the DMV. I did not expect from the DMV, right? So I'm not sure about the security implications of you seeing the last 5 digits of my title, but basically you start here, here's this conversational thing, right? A couple of little checklist items that probably most people end up messing up, so they put that right in your face, and then they want to know if I have this information handy, and yes I do, and then they want to know my license plate and my title. So they come back, I owe some money, they know what kind of car I have, yes, this is right, they know, and you could follow me in the parking lot and figure out what kind of car I have, so I'm not worried about that, right? They know my insurance. So these are all things, if you think about it, they previously would have had to build the really long form, and we all just hate the really long form, first name, last name, email, right? And Chrome makes it a little bit easier because it'll fill out most of that stuff for you, but not necessarily everything. And so it's a pain, right? So what this is an example of a bot that has a connection to a database. It took a little bit of input from me. It went out to some other system. It got some more information. It answered a lot of questions for me. It's helping me fill out this form. I don't feel like I'm working against the form. It's just asking me questions and I'm answering them one at a time. And it's really linear and it's really simple. And there's like no frustration dealing with this. There's a ton of frustration filling out forms and surveys, and that's why people don't do it, right? So it's the total opposite of their offline experience, and again, it's because of the scalability thing, right? On the web, they can scale that experience. They can make it one-on-one, they can make it feel personal. Okay, so then bots come in sort of levels of complexity, right? And the starting point is a decision tree where you give people some choices, they pick A or B, or they pick A or B or C, they fill in some kind of answer, and then you decide what's next. It's the choose your own adventure type of experience, right? And that's a great way to present frequently asked questions as an example, right? It's a great way, Teresa covered a ton of things that you can do that way, right? So, so the DMV system is something like a decision tree still, but there's a database behind it. So they didn't have to pre-code every single person's license number when they built the bot. The bot has the ability, the code for the bot has the ability to go look up in the database to find out that I did my inspection and so I'm eligible to register, right? So the data behind that bot is changing over time, and that requires a little bit different approach to how you work with that. So then the next level maybe is when we get into like natural language processing, which in the bot world they call it intent, right? So we're trying to find out what's the person's intent. So instead of asking them, to fill out the license plate number and the last digits of the title, they might say, how can I help you today? And it's up to me to tell it, I want to renew my registration, or I need a replacement driver's license. And it's going to parse what I type. It's going to take my words and it's going to figure out, what am I trying to do? What's my intent in dealing with this bot, right? So again, it doesn't have to be, the example that I showed was typed. It doesn't have to be typing, right? It can be speaking to Siri or Alexa. The next level, if you will, right? The next sort of more complicated thing here is the idea of if you use Google Analytics to watch what people do on your site, you can get a ton of information, right? People hit the home page, then they go straight to shop, or they go straight to specials, or they do whatever, right? You can sort of watch people's paths. So one of the things that you can't find out with Google Analytics is what people cannot find, right? Any missed opportunity, anything that people want that your site doesn't deliver, you're never going to get that with analytics, right? Because it's watching, what do people do, what do they click on, where do they go, what pages do they hit, and it's tracking that data, where a bot can track those conversations. So let's put ethics and privacy and security and all those kind of things on hold for a moment, right? And just talk about what could happen. So I'm going to assume that you've got a privacy policy in place that lets people know that you're doing these kind of things if you're doing these kinds of things, right? But it's in the realm of possibility that you can find, what are people searching for, what are they talking about, what are their frustrations, and you can deep dive into that information. And then of course with machine learning and artificial intelligence, you can get even deeper and start to look for trends in that pile of communication, right? You can start to tell that lots of people have a similar frustration about a specific product. Maybe we need to get involved with engineering to work out some kink with this product, right? So there's some really interesting stuff that you can get when you start to deep dive on the data in those conversations. Okay, so why chatbots? 1 billion messages to business every month. You can't scale that with people, right? You cannot hire enough people to type the reply to meet that need. It's overwhelming. I think Teresa commented on this. You've got 8 times the response rate to text messages than you do to email. 30% of customers report receiving. If you flip it, that's 70% of customers who would accept a text from you, but you don't send it to them, because 70% are not out there actively engaging customers this way. And it's customers who are open to it. And then 64% of people told Facebook that the reason that they message businesses is because they're messaging anyway. They're already there, right? So this is the point of meeting people where they are. They're not on your website, they're in Messenger. So why now, right? Why chatbots now? So the first is this economy of scale piece, right? It's a big deal. The numbers of people that are interacting with us online are going up and up, and we need a way to deal with that without hiring up staff. The integration with social media and messaging platforms, the fact that artificial intelligence and machine learning, this used to be data scientist stuff tucked away in a lab trying to invent the next super computer type of thing, right? And now this technology has made its way into marketing. So we've got smart digital agencies who are mining massive amounts of data, looking for trends to figure out how to market better, how to innovate, right? So the world is changing, and machine learning is not just for people locked away in labs, it's for kind of everybody today. Voice is mainstream, right? So with my voice, I can activate a whole bunch of things. They're pretty good at understanding what I say. I don't know if you guys know, there was this IBM tool from the 80s or 90s called Dragon Speak, where you could talk into a mic and it would type what you were talking, and it was, you had to train it forever, and it was decent, but I still prefer to type than to use that kind of thing. But today the voice seems to be able to keep up with me. My car occasionally doesn't get what I'm saying, but you know what I'm saying? For the most part, voice apps understand what I say, and for the most part, when they speak back to me, they speak intelligibly. So there's that. Then there's this whole thing that in a conversation with a bot or with a person, right, the attention level goes way up and the frustration level comes way down. If I'm on your website and I'm looking for something, it's that needle in a haystack thing. Number one, I don't know if it's even there, right? I don't know if you have the piece of information that I want on your site at all, right? And the process of looking may not be intuitive because you built one navigation structure and I might be thinking about things in a different set of categories than you are. So looking for content on somebody's site when there's all those distractions is really frustrating. When that comes to a point and I get to ask a thing a question and get a specific response back, as long as the bot itself isn't frustrating, right? That's a low frustration, high engagement, high attention kind of experience, and so that really works. And then what I hear all the time from marketing types, advertising types, is this like, how do we get insight into the buyer's journey, right? Everything is storytelling and buyer's journey, where you're trying to figure out somebody was sitting on their couch and they wanted something or they wanted to solve some problem. And then eventually they ended up buying your product or buying your service, and people want to understand what happened in between. And so if we go back to that analytics piece, there's only so much information you can get if they searched the web, found your site, went to a page and bought it. If they're engaging in a conversation, there's an entire new world of information that you can get about what they're interested in, what their frustrations are, what their questions are, and it helps you improve. Okay, so how do you build these things, right? So Microsoft has the Azure bot service, and they've got this paragraph that explains about conversational experiences, and IBM has a Watson Assistant, which is a very similar thing that talks about natural language and human interactions, and Google has dialogflow, which talks about rich conversational experiences. And so, the big players, as you'd expect, have the big tools, and they solve most of the problems with these big tools. And that is, you have to figure out what is somebody's intent, what are the things that they're talking about, right? The objects, the entities that they're talking about, and then how do you help them get those things done? So intents, right? That's things like finding out the status of an order, or trying to put something in my cart, right? If I'm shopping on an e-commerce site, that's the intent mining. And again, it's done with natural language. So I don't have to write out in advance every single way you could say, please tell me the status of my order, right? It uses the ability to understand English and many other languages to work out that that's what somebody is trying to say, the same way that we do as people. And then the entity thing is, you want to be able to deal with an email address as an email address and not just a bunch of random characters. You want to be able to deal with phone numbers as something that you could send a text to and not just a random number string. So you want to start to take these inputs and break them into objects that you can work with, that you can do something with. And then there's even things like, like small talk, right? What if somebody says something clever to the bot? What do you want it to do, right? Who are you? Who's your boss? What's your name? What do you do in the situation where, as a person, you're telling it some fact that you know is right? My address is P.O. Box 1234, and whoever programmed this thing is looking for P.O. Box and only 3 digits, and so it's not letting you put in that 4th digit. Or it used to be that email addresses all ended with dot and something with 3 characters, so those of us who write code to prevent you from making a mistake would say the only valid thing you can type in the email address box is something at something dot and 3 characters. And so now today there's dot 2 characters and there's dot 20 right? There's everything seems to be a valid email address, and old code is gonna break, right? So my answer is yeah, old code unfortunately breaks, which is part of the maintenance process, right? It happens with vehicles, they need maintenance, buildings need maintenance, code needs maintenance, especially when the rules change and things adapt over time. So it's definitely a failure. The risk and the advantage on the bot side is a well-coded bot is going to report back those kinds of issues. So it's tracking its own history, it's looking for failures where typical code doesn't. Right? A lot of times, if you just build a contact form and somebody has an issue, they don't submit it and you never find out, right? So in this case, at least, a smart bot is going to know, hey, we got stuck at this spot, and then whoever's job it is to train, and I could talk a little bit about training, but that's a process too, is helping improve the quality of the bot that you've already built. The DMV example, they're talking to a database to look up a bunch of information, right? There's nothing that would stop us, and in fact, it's pretty simple to do, to have a bot just be the first line of defense for customer service, and you build in a rule that after 5 minutes of contact with the bot's going to reach out to a real person in customer service, right? So you can have one bot that can service thousands of people, try to thin that down to just a few who then are waiting in line for even fewer customer service employees, right? So that's possible too. So another, I have a company called Musica Pristina. We make like high-end consumer audio products, and I've got a quick demo here of a bot. Hi, great, right? Can you tell me my order status? And it says, to view the status of a current order, please let me know your email address, right? So I was talking about entities before. The way this is set up, I'm not logged in, so it doesn't know who I am, right? I'm just an anonymous user on the website, or sitting on the couch talking to Alexa, and I say, hey, ask Musica Pristina, what's the status of my order, right? And so the bot knows it needs some information. So we built it with an intent that talks about order status, and to fulfill that intent, there's 2 facts that I need to know, and that's your email address and your order number. So I say my email address is kwelsh@welshtechnologies.com. And now it wants to know my order number. So it didn't say, hey, Kevin, and it could have, right? But there's this whole security privacy thing that as software developers, we should be thinking about too. And so on the one hand, this is a bot for customers to find out about their order status. On the other hand, you could turn this into a bot to get people's first name and last name from their email address. If this were some high volume place like Walmart, and I went here and I typed in every Gmail address that I could think of, and it came back with, hi Kevin, hi Sally, hi Tim, hi Bill, right? I'd be able to mine data out of the bot. So we have to be really careful about how friendly it is with security in mind, right? So it doesn't say, hey Kevin, how are you? It doesn't say, hey Kevin, the status of your order is XYZ, because then you could also find out about purchases, right? So in our example, it doesn't greet me with my name. It wants to know the order number. The order number was 1234, and it hits the back end and it says, we received your order and are in the process of building it. Seems you ordered one of the Virtuoso PCM. And so it could send me anything at this point, right? In the sense, I've like authenticated with an email address and an order number, and it would be really hard to guess both of them together. So we felt like that's secure enough. And for some companies it's not, but in our case it is. Dialogflow is Google's product, and here's sort of the top level things that you work with. You build intents, which are what are people trying to do, entities, which are things like email addresses and order numbers. There's a piece in there for small talk, so that when I say hi, it says hi back. When I say who's your boss, it says Kevin's my boss, but Bruce Springsteen is the boss, that kind of stuff. There's knowledge, which means the bot can learn things over time. Fulfillment is it goes out to other resources. Training is I can run the bot in a loop and help it to get better. History and analytics, we kind of mentioned that there's just a ton of conversational data that you can pull out of that, right? If you're selling cars and you ask somebody how many kids do they have because you're trying to figure out what car you want to sell them, you now know how many kids they have, right? So there's a bunch of things that you can get that people are not going to fill out in a form that they might tell a bot. So really, right, why chatbots? So there's this whole sales insight kind of piece, and you're conversationally building a profile, not having people fill out boring forms. There's the customer service piece, where this gentleman had mentioned, right, you can provide a sense of resolution while you wait for a real customer service rep to show up. And then there's this buyer's journey piece where you can start to find out what did people not find on your website, because that's, I think, one of the biggest things is it's really hard to know what people could not find on your site unless you have a way of talking to them. And that's really hard to do when the scale hits the thousands. So back to Frank's point, from lead generation to sales, surveys to segmentation, chatbots can help your business and your customers and increase engagement with your content right where your customers are. And I hope I proved that. So the question to anyone watching from home, quick background, sometimes phone systems have this frustration navigational thing where you can't find the option that you want. And how do we avoid building chatbots that create that same experience? So to me, I think, and you probably agree, the number one thing is you have got to test it. You've got to be in the mindset of the user and run testing. I think it's easy to build a thing, expect that somebody on the client team is going to test it for you, and they're going to run it through usually the success paths and not those failure paths. And so there's no substitute for bringing anonymous people in, like a focus group. That's big in the ad agency space. As you get to smaller businesses, that probably is cost prohibitive to do a focus group with 10 or 30 people and have them run through and look for the types of things that, as a developer, right, I know the pitfalls, so I'm not going to ask it the question that I know it won't answer. I think Martin and I on the way over here were talking about, I think it might have been a Microsoft failure where somebody managed to trick the chatbot into agreeing with Nazi values or something along those lines, right? And so that's, yeah, that can happen. Having somebody responsible for monitoring it, right? It's not build it and then just, walk away assuming that every problem is solved. It's build it knowing that instead of 100 people in customer service, we need 10, but they're going to monitor the chatbot. Does it have to be the case that as soon as you hit a site, the chatbot jumps up and wants to chat with you? And most of us don't like that, right? So yeah, there's all kinds of things that you can use as a trigger. So you could use the duration on the site, right? So you drop a cookie when somebody gets there and you count to 120 and then you pop it up. Or you can count number of page views or the vertical distance that a person has scrolled, right? So there's all sorts of things that you can do that are better than you hit my home page, here comes the bot. And I agree with you. I think subtlety is a good thing. Sometimes chatbots pretend to be a human being, and what do we think about that? And I have an experience of reaching out to Microsoft about their Surface headset. I didn't know if it had a mic, and I asked if it had a mic, and I didn't know if it was a bot or a person talking back to me. There was a couple of grammar glitches, and so I thought it might have been a real person, and it came back with, yeah, it has a mediocre mic. And I said back something along the lines of mediocre, and it's like, yeah, a lot of headsets have mediocre mics. And I'm like, why mediocre? Mediocre means good, not really good. And so it was this really odd engagement, and it got me thinking, like, is there a person who English is not their first language and they picked the word mediocre and maybe shouldn't have? Or is it a bot that looked that word up and is tossing it out and it shouldn't have, and do I report it, right? So it's uncomfortable to me to not know if that's a real person or not. So yeah, I think there's value in announcing up front that I'm the bot from XYZ Corporation. I don't know that everybody would agree with me on that, right? I think sometimes marketers like to try to fly just below the radar, but my ethics say let's tell people that it's code and not a person. Anybody else? All right, thank you.